This lecture is on the pharynx. So you already know about the pharynx itself, that common passage for air, liquid, and food. We're now talking about it in the context of the respiratory system, starting at the top with the area known as the nasopharynx. So the nasopharynx then is the region of the pharynx then that is posterior then to the internal nares, superior to the soft palate, and ending with the oropharynx. So there we have the nasopharynx nicely defined, except for this business of the palate. So let's briefly go into the parts of the palate. The palate is basically the roof of your mouth. So we have a hard palate that separates the oral and the nasal cavities. It is anterior, and it is made of bone. It's basically right behind your front teeth, that hard area up there, right behind your front teeth, your upper front teeth. That then is your hard palate. And although there's a little bit of soft tissue immediately there, underneath it, it is made of bone. You probably remember again from when you were studying the skull, there was the palatine bone, and there was that portion then of the frontal bone making up the bony hard palate. So the hard palate then separates the oral and nasal passages. It is more anterior. It is made of bone. And then we have the soft palate. And this then extends behind the hard palate So it's that extension of the hard palate going more posterior then. And this then is made of soft tissue. So that's the nasopharynx, which is bounded from one side by the palate. Then we have the oropharynx. into which the air passes. After going through, that's an H, through the nasopharynx, or being inhaled through the mouth. So here we have the oropharynx. So the oropharynx then is the middle portion of the pharynx. And its boundaries then are, it is bounded superiorly by the nasopharynx, there's one boundary. Anteriorly by the oral cavity, and inferiorly by the laryngo, that's an NGO there, by the laryngo. So that then is how you can find the oropharynx. Now we'll talk about the laryngopharynx. So the laryngopharynx then includes that portion of the pharynx lying between the hyoid bone. I hope you remember the hyoid bone. It's one of the very few bones in your body that is not attached to any other bones. The hyoid bone is that funny sort of arc-shaped bone that sits in the front of your throat. It basically sits on top of the larynx, but it is made of bone while the larynx is made out of cartilage. So you remember the hyoid bone, and here we are talking about the laryngopharynx. So the laryngopharynx then includes that portion of the pharynx lying between the hyoid bone and the entrance to the esophagus, which is not a part of the respiratory system. So that little area there where you can wind up having the food getting diverted into the esophagus or the air being allowed into the respiratory system, that little area there is the laryngopharynx. So materials then entering the GI tract then pass only through the oropharynx and the laryngopharynx, which is to say you cannot ingest your food through your nose. But there we have the three different portions of the pharynx.